Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on the Masechtas Gittin daf Ayin Aleph. We are going to begin on the very top line of Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph. Omer of Kahana. So we're going to remember Rav Kahana. Omer Rabbi said in the name of Rab the following: Cherish Yachol Adaber. So you have someone who's a cherish, so he's deaf. However, he does have the ability to speak. Says Rashi, Shahi Pikeach. So this person is considered halachically of sound mind. Kishenichnasa, when he got married. The Kiddush of Kiddushin Gemurin, it's a good Kiddushin, even though he's a cherish. The Tanan Begamas, it also says in Masechtas Evamas, Nescharish who, if let's say he is a cherish, or Nishtata, if let's say is a shaita, Lo Yotze Lamas. In that situation, he could not divorce. Of Yishein Koyach Begirushe Cherishos Lafki Kiddushi Chachma. He will not be able to divorce because he doesn't have the wisdom. Become a Rav. And a Rav is saying here, as we're going to see, if he could speak, through writing, he knows how to write on parchment, kisvu tenu, get l'ishti, that he writes on a document, write and give this get to my wife. Atem ploni umasolhem pikech gamarhu v'kais v'naisen, which L'chaira is talking about even if he's a cherish, she enu yachol adaber, says the Gemara again. So if a cherish yachol adaber, he can speak, mitochak sav, he can only speak, not that he could speak. It doesn't mean he could speak. He mamish is a cherish. He's an enu shaman, enu medaber, but he could speak through writing. So kaisvin v'naisen gel ishto. So if he writes all this information, we're going to give him we'll say it's an acceptable get, which is a great chiddush because we said before that he cannot divorce his wife because he can't speak and maybe he's not of sound mind. But for some reason we can say that he knows how to write. That shows he is of sound mind. Rav Yosef, my kamashval and Tanina. We learned this. It says nishtatek. If you have a situation, the Omer lo, this person again is not able to talk. V'amru lo, and we ask him, Nichtav get le'ishtacha, should we write a get for your wife? V'hirkin b'roishai. This is our Mishnah that we saw in yesterday's daf. He starts shaking his head, yes, no, in different directions. Biting us and we check him 3 times. Im amar al lav lav al hein hein hari il yichav yitnamu. We're gonna accept what he said, what he doesn't say, but based on his motions, we'll understand. Oh, he must comprehend. He understands what we're saying, and therefore we already learned this. So, what is he coming to add? Are you talking about someone who's mute? Shani ilim. That our Mishnah is not talking about someone who cannot hear. This person is able to hear. You're speaking to him. He just doesn't have the ability to speak. So, an ilim is considered to be halachically competent. And therefore, there's not a shiloh. The whole issue is, do we know what he wants? But he certainly understands what we're saying. That's the reason why when he shakes his head, that's acceptable. Over here, we're talking about someone who is not even able to hear. So therefore, because he's someone who cannot hear or speak, therefore, because of that, it's more problematic. And this is a chiddush that he can write, then we're going to say that's acceptable to Sanya. As we learned, it's actually more in the beginning of Masechtas Chagiga. Medaber, we're talking about whether a person can be oil or regel, is a medaber and a shemeya. Someone who can speak but cannot hear, zehu cheresh. Shemeya ve'en medaber, zehu ilim. The zeh, in both situations, are kipikchin l'chol debrehen. They are considered to be pikchin. They have all the halachic requirements because they're not considered to be on the status of someone who doesn't have das. Umamai de medaber ve'en shemeya zehu cheresh. How do we know that is the proper words and language? So it's based on the following pasuk in Tehillim. Yani kecherish lo eshma. I'm a kecherish. What's a cherish? Somebody can't hear. Uki'ilim, I'm an ilim lo yiftach piv. I can't open up my mouth, means I can't speak. V'imoy se'ema kidei amri inchi. It's like people say that ishtakil milule, that my words were taken away. And on a play of words, that's comparable to someone who's in Elim. Those letters correspond, as Rashi says, Noitarikoin de Elim. It's like a abbreviation. Amrav Zera. Ani kashili. I had a question. Hakashili, says Rashi, that that which Rav Kahana said in the name of Rav, Desanya. The pasuk says regarding Shavuos Edus, Imlo Yagid, so you have a chiyuv to give over testimony that you know about, and you can't lie and say, "Oh, I didn't know about it." There's a isser in that. However, that's pral elim sheniachol hagid. That's excluding an elim that can't speak. Says Rashi, shenochayim carbon shvua el shvuos edus. Im hishbiu v'hirkin b'roisha sheniyodeya. If, let's say, you say, "Do you know edus?" and he shakes his head no, even though he's a lot, it turns out he was lying, so he's not going to be chayav a carbon in that situation. Am I? But he could write Mitach Ksav. So l'chora, according to the sheet of Rav Kahana and then Rav, he should hold that you are chayav a carbon. So Amalei Abaya, no, edus kamrit. There's a reason why we're excluding this person when it comes to a carbon regarding edus. Shani edus derachman omer mipiyim v'lo mipiksavam. Really, ksavam should work normally. However, when it comes to edus, it cannot be just written down. It must actually be verbalized, must be said. And therefore, the fact that this person shakes his head, no, I don't know anything, that would exclude him from a carbon regarding dinim of Shavuos Edus. But nonetheless, the sheet of Rav Kahana still stands, and therefore the din should be that just as long as he could write it down, it should be a get. So on this, the Gemara asks a question. Meisvei, for the Gemara, kishem, just like Gittin, just like we examine this person, again, who can't speak, regarding Gittin, and he could shake his head yes and no. Also, when it comes to various business dealings, and gifts, and it says explicitly, testimony, so all this is going to be explained later on, but Katani Miyas Eidus, we see that l'chayra, him shaking his head, is enough for testimony. So Rav Yosef Bar Minyamin Amar Rav Sheshes be'edus isha. Even though you're right, we typically will not allow an elam to be engaged in testimony because it has to be that you speak. However, we're going to be so lenient when it comes to a woman, dekil b'rabbanon, in order to make sure that this woman is able to get remarried. Says Rashi, we're mekel be'ed echad, karo, b'shimcha, all these different leniencies. Therefore, that's the reason why we're mekel by an elam as well. The hakatani yerushos, but the question is, it says yerushos, and the havamina, says Rashi, it means lahed al yerusha. It has to do with testimony regarding inheritance. So Amar Rabbi Avo, no, yerushos b'noi habachar. We're talking about the yerusha for his own son. That's what is referring to. Says Rashi, that if he wants that he should even the playing field for how much his children could get, even the firstborn. The imlo l'shanais al mishpat Yerusha shel Tairahu, ba lamalanu l'davar Yerusha mi'aleha tipoil. So it's not regarding, oh yeah, my son who's a bechor should get pishnayim. He gets pishnayim. It's from the Torah. It means that he has the ability to give all of his children equal amounts if this is how, that's what his will was at his while he was alive. So Rav Avo Yerushas Bono Bechor Katani Miis, but nonetheless we learn regarding business transactions. So my love must be referring to engaging in business transactions for the world, and this is a form of testimony. When it says lo lididei, it's referring to for himself. Meisvei cherish, when it comes to someone's a cherish, will holchu boy achari rimoizoisav. It says beferish, we do not go after his hints, v'achar kafit soisav, again his hand motions, v'achar ksav yadai. It says even if he writes it down, that's not enough. El b'metalton. Well, by metalton we're going to be lenient because k'dichayev, we need him to be able to survive. So when it comes to metalton, we're lenient. But here's the question of Lola Gittin. It says Rashi, Hecha de kedusha hayu kedushin gemurin, in a situation where it was a good kedushin, it's a tiyufta Rav Kahana. So if in fact it was a good kedushin, which is going to be part of the answer maybe, so then it's not going to be acceptable regarding a get, even ksav yadam. So how could Rav Kahana have said that a cherish, he can just write it down and that's enough. So your answer is you're right, but we're not going to call that a tiyufta, we're going to say tanoihi. It's actually machlokas, the sanya. When do we say that it doesn't work when it comes to Gittin? Only if we're dealing with b'cherish mi'ikarai, someone who is a cherish his entire life. It says Rashi, she'ein lo ksav yad al shel das. He never learned how to write while he had das. He only learned when he was a cherish, because he was always a cherish, which means he never had what's called das salula, clarity. And therefore, since he was a cherish from the onset, so we say that in that situation, if let's say he got married v'remiza with hints, which will allow it, but it's not an actual like kedusha deraisa, so therefore, since it's not a kedusha gemurin, umukila biyava. Okay, we'll see the rest of that. So anyway, he says that if he's always a cherish, his writing down doesn't help. However, if you learn to write while he was a pikeach, when he had again clarity, so in that situation, even now he's a cherish, we're still going to accept it, and therefore then his ksav yada will work. So Rav Kahana can say that maybe when do we allow the cherish to write down, we're going to accept his ksav, if he was at one point a pikeach. So Mora says, "V'cherish mi karo lo." Are you telling me, is it true that when someone was always a cherish, we're not going to accept their ksav yad? But we say that just as he can get married with hints, he can divorce with a hint. So it says Rashi, Mishnahi biyavamos, the cherish shenasa isha imratza yaitzi. That if a cherish marries, which is in this non-kedushin gemura, it's not an actual strong 100% kedushin. It's a kedushin, but it's not like a kedushin deraisa, if you will. So therefore, since at least it's a kedushin on a lower level, so he should also be able to divorce her on that same level for a misa. So how can you tell me that when it comes to a cherish, mikara, if he was always a cherish, that he doesn't have the capacity to be able to do ksav yad? So where it says, you're right. If we're dealing with his wife, yeah, he could do that. He's able to do it. And therefore, there's no chiluk. When it comes to even his wife, he could write it down, which perhaps is Rav Kahana can say that's what we're talking about in all situations. Here we're talking about his yavama. So what is that? Says Rashi, shikidusheha gemurin v'zikasa gemura. So this man is a cherish, but he had a brother. Now his brother married a girl, and it was a full kedushin. And then the brother died. So now who's left? This cherish. Now it was a kedushin gemura, and therefore the zika is actually just as strong. So now he can't do chalitza, since he can't say loy chafatzti. So he marries her with yibum, but then he can't do gerushin. Says Rashi, biavimtoi. For who ein yochol lachleitz, he can't do chalitza. Lefi she'enu mim'amad v'amar lo chafatza lekachta, because he cannot make this declaration because he's a cherish. He can't talk also. But kindness, but he could marry her through yibum because of his brother. However, because it's a very strong marriage, the enu moitzel oil, he can't divorce her. The get didei lo mifka zika diraisa, because his weak get cannot remove the strong zika of yibum. So therefore, that's what it's referring to. So let's look at Rashi. Yavim to the mimad. If let's say his brother was a cherish, that should be accepted. If let's say his brother's also a cherish, so that kedushin was weak, so the zika is weak, so he should be able to divorce her with a weak divorce. It refers to, as we just said, that the brother was a pikeach. And since the brother was a pikeach, and then he dies, so that zika is so strong, he can marry her, can't do a chalitz, he can marry her, but he can never divorce her. Question 3, also TA9, TB10. Cherish mi kadai. He was always a cherish. Says in parentheses, Shlo haisel adas salulam yamav, shekanas yevimtai shenafel me'achim pikeach o cherish. So im moitzia b'ramiza. So it depends. So if his brother was a pikeach, he can never divorce her. He can do yibum, can't do chalitza, he can never divorce her. But if his brother was also a cherish, then this brother who's also a cherish can do with remiza. Okay. If you want, the Gemara says, maybe actually, no, even his brother was a cherish. So the question is, if his brother was a cherish, so it was a weak marriage, it was a weak zika, so he should be able to divorce her. No, so that's actually, it's interesting, this Iboy Seima, at least at this point, we're going to see, maybe we're not going to stick with this answer, that we're geyser oughtu. So Yahalchi Ishtanami. If you're making gzeres, you should make a gzer also that he shouldn't be able to do this for his wife. The yavimta v'yavimta machalfa. A person can make a mistake between one yavam and another yavam. Ishtam yavamta lo machalfa. But a person's not going to make a mistake between a yavama and divorcing your wife. Are we really going to make such a gzer as we continue Ayin Alpha with Beis? But we learned regard in Masechtas Yavamas as well. You have Shnei Achin Chershin. You have two brothers, and they're both cherish, which means that they can get married, but that kedushin is only a weak kedushin, or kedushin de rabbanan. Nesuin shtei achayos pikos, and they end up marrying two girls, and they could hear, they're healthy. O shtei achayos cherishos. Let's say they marry two sisters, so two brothers marry two sisters, and all four of them are deaf. O shtei achayos, or two sisters, achas pikachas v'achas chereshes, maybe the one of them was. The chen shtei achayos chereshos. Also, if you have two sisters who are chereshos, the suishal shnei achin pichin, who married two healthy brothers, o shnei achin, two brothers chereshin, o shnei achin echad pikach v'echad cheresh. So in all different potential situations, hari elu paturus min a chalitza min a yibum. So the din is, there's no, because we're dealing with two brothers and two sisters, if one of the brothers dies, so as the beginning of the Masechtas Yevamos discusses, so because you're not able to marry your wife's sister, unless your wife had died, but your wife's alive, so therefore she is potter from chalitza and from yibum. Now in this situation, you would maybe think it's different because this is only kedusha d'Rabbanan. But since she's an ereva, again, of achais isha, it's your wife's sister, two sisters, and it's only kedusha d'Rabbanan, so you don't do anything. You don't even do chalitza. However, let's say these girls are not related. So yichnasu, so they can get, and one of the brothers dies, so you can marry the imratzul hoitzi and yoitziyoi. However, if you want to divorce, you can divorce her. So what do we see from here? We see clearly that we do allow him to divorce her, and we aren't geyser atu pikeach. This is the case of Yibam. So he said, maybe we're going to be geyser when a yavam to a yavam, one is cherish, one is pikeach. We see we don't do that. And then where it says you're right. Therefore, this actually is correct. Question 3 is correct. That there is this distinction. That if in fact he was, let's say both brothers were a cherish and that brother died, so then this other brother is able to do divorce her. If he marries her, does yibum, he could divorce her. However, not when it comes to if his brother was bikech, because that kedushin was a strong kedushin, it's a strong zika. Omer Rabbi Yochanan, chalukan alav chaver av Hashem Gamliel. So it says that there are those that disagree with Rabbi Gamliel. So Rabbi Afanan Amatanina. We also have support to this. What does it say? That nishtet, if she becomes a shaita, right? So she becomes a shota. In that situation, lo yoitzi. So you cannot divorce her. So the problem is, even though let's say everything is fine, but the reality is you need some level of das. She needs to be able to be shomer her get. Nischarish hu. Let's say he becomes deaf. Oh nishtata, or he becomes a shota. So lo yotze lamas. So here it says lo yotze lamas. So one says lo yotze, one says lo yotze lamas. So my olamas, what does it mean forever? What's that extra word? Lav, is it not? It means that even if he's able to write it down, we see that that's not enough. So Amar Papa, Ilav Dishamin and Rabbi Yochanan, if it wasn't for the fact that Rabbi Yochanan brought this up, Havamina, we would think Frushi time to Tanakama Hudasa, that he's only coming to explain the Tanakama. My Olamis, Afagad the Chazin and the Charif, even though we may see that he is sharp, says Rashi. Avol Medaber B'Techaksav Lo Mamayit. Inami Yilk Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak, Devar Torah Shaitim Iskarashes. Midoraisa, the din is a shaita could divorce. Midei Havi Apikachas Bal Korcha, because it can be done against her will. So why do we say that it cannot be, she cannot get divorced? What's the problem? Why can't if she's a shaita? So shul yanugu minig hefker. We don't want to be noyig her minig hefker, because if she's a shaita, so then she's going to end up becoming unfortunately mistreated. Says Rashi, Inami seifa oilamis v'reisha loitani oilamis mishum dereisha the rabbanon. Maybe the reisha is like the rabbanon. Rabbi Yitzchak was seifa deraisa legabi megarish be'inan daitai. We need das ish enu moitzi el l'rtzoina. It has to be done with his ratzon. So therefore, since he doesn't have das anymore, so you can't give the get. Fine. Question 4. Nishtatis lo yoytze niskarish nishtata lo yoytze oyulamas. So why does it say? Doesn't it not say oyulamas in the ratio, but in the seifa it does? So for some it says 3 answers. There's 3 answers. Oh, the seifa kamash malan gam. The seifa it says never. We're talking about nischarish, that he becomes cherish. Even though he could speak, which is against Rav Shimon Gamliel. So maybe again, this is a proof that lo yisolamis, that you cannot do this. That even though he is able to write al gabi ksav, that's not acceptable. Or afal gav dechazina le dechoref, even though we see that he may be smart, very sharp. Okay, or mishum dereisha derabanan he the seifa deraisa. Maybe the reisha, when it says don't do it, means midirabanan you should do it. Midiraisa, it says lo yoitzi, when it says lo yoitzi oilamas. So basically, it's saying that really you could divorce by the case of a shaita. She's a shaita, but midirabanan we say no. Good Rashi. Seifa oilamis. Bereisha lo tani olamas. Mishum dereisha derabanan Rav Yitzchak. Right? Rav Yitzchak says that really you shouldn't do it. Right? So therefore, the reisha is talking about midrabanan, you shouldn't do it. Right? And the seifa is deraisa. We're talking about when Megarish, we're talking about his das. So the first case, the reisha is talking about her. So by her, it doesn't say olamas because technically you could divorce her. You shouldn't do it midrabanan. Midaraisa it works. However, if he's the problem, if he's a cherish, he's a shaita, so he has to have das when the get's being given. Next mission says the Masnisim. Amrulo nichtav geli ishtacha. Let's say they ask him. This is even to someone who's healthy or maybe a shchimira. So you ask him. Nichtav get ishtacha. Do you want us to write a get for your wife? Yom lehen kesoivu. Right? Yes, write it. Which sounds like I want you specifically to write the get, no one else. So, but they didn't do it. They didn't write the get. Instead, Omer Sefer. They told the Sefer to write it, which was really against the wishes of the husband. Because of, so the Sefer wrote it. B'le'edim v'chasmu. And then it was signed. Afal pi shikasvuhu v'chasmuhu v'nasnuhu loy. Even though it was written, it was written and signed and was given. The chazon nasnu law harizeh get haget batal. It's not a good get ad shiyarm until the husband says l'seifer kasav l'edim chasaymu. So since that's not what the husband said, so therefore it's not going to be a valid get. Says the Gemara. Taima dolo imer tenu. Maybe the whole reason over here it's an issue is because he didn't say give it. Says Rashi, Beloy kisvu, dikivan di lehem kisvu. All he did was say write it. He didn't say give it. Rashi says makbid haya hadavar shli yamru la'acher. I didn't want you to go to anyone else to have it written. Right? I didn't want that. Why? Shibaishis huloi legala she'eni yodei lichtayv get. The husband's embarrassed that he himself doesn't know how to write the get. And these guys may not know how to write a get either, maybe. But the husband's embarrassed because maybe the husband should be the one that writes a get. Therefore, he doesn't want everyone in the world to know about this. And therefore, he only asks them to do it. Now, all of a sudden, you're telling and spreading the whole world, I don't know how to write. So that's more problematic. So maybe it's only because you didn't say tenu. However, tenu, if you said tenu, says Rashi, Gabi li'ishti, to my wife, the loy armor kisru, but even if you didn't say kisru, armor lacherim, v'yichtavu v'yitnu, the asan based in the al-karchan k'kan shahay shloisha. So again, if there's, let's say you said to 3 people, so maybe the fact that you said tenu, and you didn't, even if you didn't say kisvu, but you said tenu, so the fact that you said that, maybe you're saying, I just want you to be like a based-in to have it given over. But it doesn't mean I'm specifically asking you to write it, even though the Gemara said before, even based on the Gadol of Yerushalayim, maybe that's not the case. Maybe they do have to write it, to learn how to write it. But according to this Shita, no. As we're going to see, because, we'll see. So, Mani, who's this like? Rameir, so we said before that the husband is giving over to this based-in of 3 instructions, verbal instructions, that the get should be given over. Now, in this situation, because it was only words, maybe this based-in does not have the authority to take their only words of the husband and then ask someone else to write it. Now, that's what Rameir holds, that that's not the case. He holds mili mimsur l'shliach, that words are given over the shliach. That's Rashi. Derech eretzu laso shliach devarim, that it's normal to give over your words. V'havi nami b'devarim shlucha shel adam kamaisu. It's like, you're my shliach, so a shliach can appoint another shliach, right? So therefore, if you would have said tenu, then maybe it would work. Why? Because he holds that mil mimsul l'shliach. Ema seifa ad shiyar mil cipher. You have to be exact. He has to say to the cipher, Kasuv, you write it, will aid him chasum, and the witnesses will sign it. So at time the Rabbi Yossi, the fact it sounds like the sheet of Rabbi Yossi, he says that you cannot do it. You can't just decide to appoint someone else to write it. Only when the Baal is specific. But since he didn't say that, so therefore he's instructing that you 3 people are the ones that write the get. So Reish Rameir v'Sefer Rabbi Yossi and Reish Rameir v'Sefer Rabbi Yossi. That's the mission is actually machlokas. Nobody even know. Kul Rameir. The whole mission is like Meir. So Rameir holds l'chayra that if it would say tenu, that you would be able to a group of 3 have someone else like a sofer to do it. They have the ability to give those words over. Now, we're talking about a situation where he didn't say tenu. So if he said tenu, you're right. He didn't say anything. So and therefore even Rav Meir will agree that that's not acceptable. He didn't say tenu at all. So that's what it should say. It shouldn't say until the Baal says to the Sofer, it should say ad shir mitenu. We're talking about where it was not said to 3 people. So therefore, obviously, we're not talking about a basin. So it should say those words. The distinction, the qualification should be whether there's 3 or not. 3 people. Really, everything's like Rabbi Yossi, which explains the Seifa, the reason why the husband will only allow someone else is if he's specified. So that seems clear that words are not going to b'shlech. But we made a diak and a reisha that's only because he didn't say tenu. Mashma, if he did say tenu, that they could do so. So how do we understand the reisha? Elokol Rabbi Yossi v'haf ma'askinan d'loy oimer imru. He didn't tell them to tell other people to do it. But if he did, then it would be good. So it's Delo Amar Imru. He didn't say, I want you to now go speak to someone else. Right? So therefore, that's the issue. If he didn't, it was Delo Amar Imru. But if it was Amar Imru, that if he did this, then even Rav Yossi will hold that it works and that they could, in fact, give it over to the sofer, someone else to write it. It should say that in the Mishnah, not this whole thing about what the Baal has to say. But does he really agree to this? We learned this before. You can look on the side over here. It says Ksav Seifer. Let Kasav Seifer, the Seifer writes that the aid kosher. Over there, we're talking about the sofer. Says Rashi, Lo tema dinis kasher get l'chasimas aid. Echa, that's acceptable with the signature of one witness, the ksav yad sofer sheni, and the ksav yad of the second person. El hakikamer chasam hasofer, the signature of the scribe, beget aid. The aid sheni imo kosher. It's only talking about the chasima. It's not talking about the writing of the get. That's what it's talking about. Ksav sofer aid kosher. V'yam Rabbi Yirmiyah hasam sofer sheninu. V'yam Rabbi Chisda masnisin mani. Who is this like? It says Rashi masnisin demakshir lachtim sofer beget, that the sofer could sign the get. As we continue ayin beis and aleph. Rabbi Yossi the Amri milu mimsum l'shliach. Right. So says Rashi. Therefore what? Hilkach leiko mechash l'churba. We're not concerned of an issue. Maybe he'll say to two people, Imru Lapoini, V'yichtav Lapoini, Lapoini, V'yichtav Be'azli Hani Shluche. And the Shlichim will do something different. V'chashim L'ksufa, the cipher, they'll be embarrassed about writing it. They're going to end up doing against the will of the husband. But that's not an issue for Rabbi Yossi. Rashi says, Rabbi Yossi cipher get. The Sofer did not write the get. You actually need to hear it straight from the Baal. So therefore, we're not concerned of the churba. Rabbi Yossi, the Amr Mil Limson L'Shlech. He's talking about Rabbi Yossi about Imru. But if he actually agrees to that situation, so also then nothing meaning churba. Then also a problem. If in fact, if it's Amr Imru, so that's a way out for someone else to write it. And if churba can take place there, people will think it's a get, it's not a good get. The zimna the Amr Lahu L'Shtayim. Maybe we'll say to two people, Imru l'Seifer, I want you to speak to the Seifer v'yichtov, and he'll write it. And l'ploini uploini, and two different people will sign it v'yachtamu. Umishim kisufa the Seifer, because of the embarrassment of the Seifer, chayish umachsemele. Maybe the Seifer will also sign it. He'll be, I have to write it, but I'm not going to sign it. So they're not going to say anything. They're just going to say, let the Sofer be one of the signatours. Ubal loimer. The husband never said that. So the problem is that could be Amr Imru, where the husband specified, okay, fine, so the Sofer can write it, but he specified that these two Eidim have to sign it, and if the Sofer ends up being one of the signatures, that's not acceptable because that goes against the will of the husband. We'll actually say again, well, we have to say it this way. We said before, it's seemingly a good answer. Rav Meir's the whole Mishnah. We're saying, no, Reish is Rav Meir, and same as Rav Yossi, which is one of the answers. Rav Ashi, Ermin, cool Rav Yossi. Again, we're going to try, once again, it's like Rav Yossi. V'lo miboy kamer. Lo miboy hechad olo yemer tenu, not only in a case where he didn't say tenu, abul afil emer tenu loy. Even if he said tenu, it still doesn't work. V'lo miboy hechad olo yemer lebeit tlasa. It not only in a case where he didn't speak to three, elafil emer lebeit tlasa loy. Even if he said it to three people, it still won't work. That they still can't give it over to another person. It doesn't work there. Even in that situation, because again, a chorba could happen. So according to him, he says it can never. So it's a loma boy. Ravashi. So we finally will conclude like the words of Ravashi. It says Rashi, the Omer Imru Nami Pos Rav Yossi. Rav Yossi will also hold it's not valid when it's Omer Imru. For example, if Kasav Sefer Lishma, you have the Sefer that writes it Lishma. V'chasmu Edom Lishma, and the witnesses sign it Lishma. Alfal Pi Shikasvuhu, V'chasmuhu, V'nasnuhu Lo. It was written, signed, and given, V'nasnu Lo, and given to her, so Hari get batal. Ad, and here's the key words, Sheyishmu koiloi, until you actually hear the voice. She'omer l'sefer kasel la'edim chasumu yishmu. So why does it say these words? So Yishmu is lafuki mamadi amramaydu Rabbi Yosef imru, that you actually have to hear it. So it comes to exclude that opinion. Koiloi lafuki mid Rav Kahana amarav. What was that? Says Rashi, as we saw before, acherish yachol daber. He can't speak, but he learned how to write. So mitach haksav kaisam naisim gel ishto. So it says no. It has to be sheyishmu. They actually have to hear it from the husband, and it has to be b'koiloi. And therefore, if it wasn't, it was a cherish who just wrote it down, that also will not be acceptable. Ad kan.